On the screen right there, you are live. I am live. I am Joseph MoJOE McCarthy here and so happy to spend another hour with these brilliant, beautiful humans I call my friends, Kristen Brown and D. Grant Smith. How are you, my friends?
Doing great.
Fantastic.
So good to see you both. So, for those who may be catching this for the first time, we dubbed our show, quote unquote, show, The Modern Day Alchemists last fall, and we did a series of shows on the Fireside app. But we have since fired Fireside, and we are now on StreamYard, and we are actually multicasting today on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on 3 YouTube channels, plus, oh, Wisdom. Good thing I said that because I hadn't started Wisdom. Hold, please. All right. So now we are also live on Wisdom. So for the Wisdomers, I'll welcome you as well to Modern Day Alchemists, episode 12. If you've missed any of the previous episodes, you can catch the first 8, I believe, on Fireside in the archives, and then 9, 10, 11, 12, and now are all on our YouTube channels, as well as Facebook and LinkedIn. And this is the first time that we've multicast together like this on Wisdom, although that's where we met. So I just always want to be grateful for Wisdom for bringing the 3 of us together. So before we get into the topic today, Kristen first and then D. Grant, would just greet the people, let them know where you're broadcasting from and what you're working on these days. Kristen.
Okay. Hi, people. I want to give a shout out to Cecilia Grace, who's here, who's another one of our Wisdom sisters. My name is Kristen Brown. I am a spiritual and empowerment mentor, and I help people recognize, locate, and heal their disempowered patterns to step further into their divinity so that they can attract and create the life of their dreams.
Ooh, I love that. And Kristen is too humble to say this, but recently she released her second book about the
recovering people pleaser.
Yeah, there's the title right there. And look, it's even forwards. Usually when you put it up there, it's got the backwards camera. You got it all right. A spiritual guide to, hold that there, reclaim your true worth and attract the love you deserve, by the one, the only, the #1 international best-selling Kristen Brown. The crowd goes wild.
Thank you.
Yay! All right, over to D. Grant. D. Grant is no stranger to Wisdom, no stranger to either one of us. Well, I guess we're all strange in one way or another, but that's okay. Strangers of a feather flock together, something along those lines. Anyway, D. Grant, greet the folks. Tell everybody where you're hailing from and what you're working on.
Well, right now I'm receiving your introduction, Joe. That was fun. I'm from Texas. If you take your finger and you point it into the middle of the state, you'll probably hit where I'm at. Abilene's the closest place, but that's where I'm from. And what am I working on? I'm working on myself. I'm working on being the best version of me every single day. It's a process that I call growth farming, planting love and abundance and peace and success on the inside of me so that is what comes out of me, because the universe doesn't give us what we want. The universe gives us who we are. And so I am committed to growing into the best version of myself, and I help other people grow into the best versions of themselves by doing the exact same thing that I'm doing for myself. It's a process that I call growth farming, and I communicate how to do this through awesome stories and life lessons and personal development truths and a really kick-ass community, and all that stuff is going on my website, growthfarming.com.
All right, so D. Grant, while I'm talking about you, if you could put growthfarming.com into the chat, and we will put that up on the screen for those who are on screen. Wisdom, you won't be able to see that, but it is spelled as it sounds, growthfarming.com. And I highly recommend, for those that have not met Kristen or D. Grant or both, to take some time and visit their websites. Hey, Ron Perry, welcome to the show. Nice to have you, Noble Ron. Take some time to visit their websites, not because we're trying to sell product, but because I know these two want more than anything. Oh, and my light's going out of me. Want more than anything to be helpful to anybody and everybody who is in the process of, I like to say, recovering yourself, which actually I stole that from somebody on Wisdom. I think the Tao of the Day, Martin John, recover yourself. And why is I guess we're going strobe today, so excuse my lighting. But anyway, the purpose of the three of us getting together is multifaceted. One, we just love hanging out together, and there's a great energy, a synergy, a syncopation, to use a word from D. Grant this morning, between the three of us. And I don't think any one of us take it as a coincidence that we have become friends, first through wisdom, then offline, and now multicasting with my funky strobe light here. But
I kind of like it. MoJOE.
night,
Leave it.
night. Okay, we'll go there. So I love the fact that when we get our voices together, we each bring a different perspective. That alone is rich. And then there's this wonderful experience that we both have experienced on Wisdom and on this platform, where we mingle our minds, we mingle our intentions, mingle our thoughts and ideas, and something new comes out of that, something that none of the three of us had necessarily formulated in our minds before. But as we share with great intention and heart and desire to come up with something together, we actually do create something. We create in this energetic vibration. I love the idea of waves. When waves meet in the ocean, and I'm from California, when waves meet in the ocean, if they line up just right, when they hit, they actually amplify the wave where they meet. The wave in the middle gets big, right? And that's what we're doing through the vibrations of our voices and our intentions and our mind, our energy. In alignment, we can amplify each other's ideas and create something beautiful, as opposed to much of the online culture where they're counterproductive. They're meeting each other in opposite ways and canceling each other out. We're actually amplifying each other's voices. So I have no idea where this conversation is going to go, but I'm very excited about being here. So thank you so much, Kristen Brown and D. Grant, for taking your time to share with me and with those who tune in.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you, man.
Right on. And Cecilia and Ron, thank you both for being here as well. You are a big part of this discussion. In fact, that's a great transition here, because part of the reason we chose this particular topic this week stems out of the loss of a mutual friend, not just our mutual friend, Kristen and Dee and I, but also Ron and Cecilia, who have tuned in. His name is Curdy James. He was a regular on Wisdom, probably put in countless thousands of hours being a part of that community. And there's lots of ways to describe Curdy. Those who know him generally would say that he drove you crazy, and yet he got way down deep in your heart. And I've heard people, even in the beautiful tributes that have been shared on Wisdom itself, say in their own terms, I didn't know what to do with the guy. He was like an annoying little brother or cousin or something. But the more I got to know him, the more I got to hear what was really going on inside of his heart and in his life, the more I just fell in love with the guy. And I just think that's absolutely brilliant, and such a great reminder that the best people in our lives aren't necessarily the ones that are the smartest or the most beautiful or the most talented or the richest, but they're the ones who are willing and able to express their heart. And even in the time that Curtis James was on Wisdom with us, that was an evolution and a growth in his own life. At first, like most of us, kind of guarded and tiptoed his way in, and funny, but not necessarily sharing anything of depth. And then as he was able to find a place and feel that he could be trusted with his own feelings and could share more authentically, right, with those of us on Wisdom, he would share very openly and vulnerably. And so when Curtis passed away about a week and a half ago, it was sent shockwaves through our hearts, through our community, certainly unexpected. I don't know exactly how old Curtis was, but I think he was only maybe around 40 years old. And I know that he dealt with a lot of physical ailments, was in and out of the hospital with treatments all the time. And he was very open about all of that. But wow, what an impact he had just by his presence. And this is one of my big takeaways from Curtis James, and I can't wait to hear from the two of you as well, is that the greatest present that we can give is our presence, right? It's not our ideas, our smarts, our anything. It's love. Just showing up and making that connection, which all of us desire, and all of us need to thrive is invaluable. Our presence is our present. And Curtis, whether he meant to or not, demonstrated that to all of us. Cecilia says that Curtis was 47 when he passed away just recently. So, Curtis, we all loved you. We learned to love you, just like you do with the in-laws and outlaws. I like to say they become part of your family, and Curtis became part of our family. And so I think it's really this is a beautiful opportunity for us to both pay tribute to Curtis, but also to expand our discussion as to how do we deal with grief and loss. So before we get into the details, though, I just want to give Kristen and Dee both a chance to say something in honor and tribute of Curtis. So go ahead. We'll start with Dee this time.
Well, like you said, Joe, first time he came on one of my talks, I think it was Storytelling Saturday. This is something I was doing on Wisdom. I've been a little bit off and on with it, but on Saturdays at noon my time, I would come on and I would share stories that I'd written. And for a period of time, I was reading a novel that I wrote last year that I'm actually working on the sequel to right now, called The Tune-Up. But towards the end of last year, before I say that, Curtis would come in and he would just give me his feedback on it. And it's something that I always love to hear people tell me what they think about my stories and kind of tell me like how it impacted them. Curtis was always, at first I didn't know what to do with him because I'd hear him on other places, but he would come on my show or whatever it's called, and he would just share his light and share his love. And he was encouraging all the time. And it was like we built this sort of camaraderie without me even being aware that that's what was happening. And one of the things that I discovered over the period of time that I knew Curdy, he would become your super fan without telling you that he was your super fan. But what do super fans do? They show up to all of your events. If you're a musician, they show up to all of your shows. If they don't have your band t-shirt, they make one for themselves so they can wear your stuff all over the place. Curdy did that for most of us. I was on a show on Fireside called Conduits and Vessels. He created Conduits and Vessels merchandise, and he was selling it on his Walmart store. Okay? This guy was so passionate about the people that he loved. And I have not really seen somebody go that all in and that in depth for people that they haven't met in person, but they've just had, some conversations with on a social audio app. To experience that kind of love and devotion and care and sincere desire to see other people win, Curtis is a truly remarkable person. Now, he's transitioned from our physical reality, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't exist anymore. He very much exists. And there's a part of him that's around us all the time. He's multidimensional. So I'm so happy and grateful that I got to know the human iteration of Curtis. And I'm also happy and grateful that now the iteration of him feels no pain, feels no stress, feels no worry, feels no disconnection from anything or anyone. He is in rock star heaven. And I'm so happy and grateful that I get to be connected to his energy.
Beautiful. Yes, Kristen, please.
Very well said, Dee. And all that. I second all that. I'm just going to talk from my personal experience when it comes to Curdy J. Today, I flipped on the Wisdom app and just flipped it on like I do occasionally throughout the day. And I expected to see Curdy J without even thinking about it. I just flipped on and there was a talk on, and I saw myself reading it without my glasses to see if it said Curdy J. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. And I felt such a loss in that moment. I was like, wow, our brother's not here right now in the physical plane anymore. And I wasn't even one of the people that was the closest to him. There was so many other people that back channeled him and they talked, and he met a few Wisdomers in person. But that didn't really matter, because whether or not you were that special person in his life, like that he saw a lot or not, he always got up on your stage, like you were saying, Dee, like the super fan, like, I get to be up here and talk to you. You know that a puppy that you walk into a house and everyone's like, "Oh, your dog loves me," and they're like, "Yeah, they love everybody." That's, have you ever had that? That's kind of how Curdy J was. He had such a beautiful, beautiful heart. And I wanted to share this, that it's not what people do for us that people remember, it's how they made us feel. And even though I wasn't in his tightest circle, I love Curdy J. And I'm going to say love in present, because love is never changing. I'm not loved him because when he was here, I love him now. I still love Curdy J. I'll love Curdy J in 30 years, because he was sort of this little, I don't even know how to explain it, like this little glue that bounced around in wisdom to all the peoples, all the talks, all the time. And like Dee was saying, he was so happy to be part of this community, but he also really rah-rahed and cheered everybody on all the time. The first time he got on my stage, actually, conversation, because I don't think he started holding his own talks until later. But when he first got on, like everybody said, he kind of talked in circles. He sort of didn't make sense. He didn't even take up the full 10 minutes. He just kind of got off. But he said some things, and immediately, intuitively, I felt this man's beautiful heart. A person that would never want her to fly, but always wanted other people to feel good. And at the end of that talk, he said, "Someday I'm going to come to Arizona and I want to hug you in person." And initially my egoic thought, because that's first thought in our brains, was, "Oh God, I don't even know this person. What is this? Like, oh God, is this like, stalker stuff?" And then the second thought was, not even, thought, it was a feeling. As I felt in my heart, I'm like, no, he just wants to hug people that he loves. He wants to hug people that he enjoys. So I just want to say that, like I said, the number one thing is people are going to remember how we made them feel, but also that even though somebody transitions, that doesn't mean they're gone. And just like I do with my mother, and I'm sure more conversation we're going to have in this talk today, is I still feel the love. I still communicate with them. It just looks in a different way. So I love you, Curdy J. You are missed here in the physical plane.
Absolutely. Yeah. Curtis, I know Curtis well enough, although I never did meet him in person either. I know Curtis well enough to know that he would be absolutely overwhelmed with joy and a sense of gratitude that we're even having this discussion about him. And he would be the first one to log in and be ready to volunteer to
Yes.
say something, even if it wasn't related to whatever else we're talking about. And that's cool, because Curdy was Curdy, right? And I missed the guy and I never met him. And here's, some people get online so they can be heard. They just need a voice. And I think that was kind of where Curtis was at the beginning. But as Dee Grant pointed out, eventually Curtis became not only our super fans, but he was sending paintings to people that online. He was sending gear and stuff. He was sending gifts of love to a whole bunch of different people. And he would be the first one to buy your book when it got published, the first one to buy your mug when you said you got something.
Yes.
Because he wanted to show and demonstrate how much he cared, right? And it was awkward at times, but it was beautiful as well. And I think that's the lesson, again, that I'm reminded of, is that we don't have to have it all together to be loved or to be loving. In fact, sometimes it's in our crazy funkiness that we make these amazing connections, and that's what this whole thing is about right today. So I just want to say thank you, Curtis, for all that you contributed and have continued to contribute to our lives. And now I want to broaden the discussion into this whole idea of grief and loss. And it's very easy to talk about living and loving and learning, and because those are things that fill us up and give us hope, and that we want to grow, and all those type of things. But not a lot of people are ready, willing, or able to talk about grief and loss. And grief and loss are very closely tied together. There's lots of information out there. So rather than us just dispensing information today, I wanted Dee Grant and Kristen and I to all share about loss that we've experienced. What did we learn from that? How do we deal with that, right? And you can be as personal or detailed as you wish, or as not, and that's all good. But I want the people who are tuned in, either live or after the fact, to be able to take away this idea that one, loss is normal, right? It's part of life. Life and death are two parts of the equation that we all will experience, both in those that we love and in our own lives as well, even though we don't like to talk about that, right? But I think anytime we keep something secret, we keep it to ourselves, it grows in all sorts of funky ways in the darkness, and usually not in very healthy ways. So bringing even the idea of loss, of death, of grief into the light can help us embrace where's the beauty, where's the blessing in that? Is there such a thing? So I'm just going to toss it out. Whoever is feeling inspired at this moment, just jump in and go where your heart's going with you on this one.
Okay. The look from Kristen.
Well, you guys always, I'm the girl, so it's like girls first. But I'm like, Dee, you get to be the girl today.
It is a beautiful day for all kinds of
Congratulations.
Well, you were pampering me with all of your wonderful compliments earlier about my hair and my complexion and everything. So
Sultry.
appreciate it. So what Joe was saying early on about, we can be philosophical about this, and I'm a intensely, deeply, endlessly philosophical person. Both of these guys know that. Right. Ron knows it. Cece knows it. Any of you guys that have seen any of my videos, I wax about this stuff all the time. And it's easy for me to just stay on the stairway to heaven via the philosophical side of things. But when we're dealing with grief and loss, that can feel like we're trying to avoid what's really going on, and maybe even deny what it is because we're not willing to actually let ourselves experience the depth of what it is that's going on, which is loss. Loss doesn't feel good. Loss feels like another 4-letter word for poop. It feels terrible. And I don't know how non-PG I can be here. So I'm just trying to,
All good. All good.
I'm not PG, so you guys have to deal.
That's great. A couple years ago, I think it was 3 years ago, a friend of mine who was a gigantic inspiration to me, just about everybody in my community, the entirety of Abilene, Texas, all 150,000 something people, knew of this guy and revered him in some way. He was literally Superman, and that's no hyperbole. His name was Mark Rogers. Mark was somebody that when you met him, he was kind of like Curtis. When you met him, he made you feel like you were, the king of the world, like you were the most important person in the universe. He just radiated this loving energy that made you feel like you were literally the most important person in the world. But he was like Barack Obama. He knew everybody. And wherever he went, just throngs of people would come up and he always had this massive smile on his face. He was always just so high energy, so full of love and so full of joy, and just pouring it out to whoever it was that was around him. And 3 years ago, he was killed in an automobile accident. On the way back, he was with his family. All of them were in the accident. He was the only one that died. And my entire town grieved his loss. And I still have close friends that were really close with him from college that are still grieving that as though it happened yesterday. And when I see them around town and I ask them how they're doing, they'll still use the verbiage of, I'm just trying to make it, just trying to keep moving forward. It's been really hard. And what I discern and gain from that is sometimes we can be so impacted by the loss of someone the death of someone that we care about so much, who have become and been such an integral part of our lives, that they're like a part of not just our family, they're like another part of us. And so it's like a part of us doesn't wake up in the morning and doesn't meet us for coffee in the morning and isn't a part of our day. And that kind of intensity, you can't wax on, wax off with philosophy. It's something that there's a process for it that has to happen. And the grieving process, whether we're talking about the grieving of the end of a relationship, or whether we're talking about the grieving of the death of somebody or the end of the relationship, because that is a death too, we have to let ourselves feel what it is that we feel. And I think that can be the hardest thing for anybody to go through, because again, it doesn't feel good, and we want things to be the way that they were. And I think a big obstacle to the healing process is something that Kristen talks about all the time, and I'm curious if she's going to talk about it now when I pass the baton to her. But the letting go of the attachment and the allowing of the healing to take place. Because like the three of us have said, we still celebrate Curtis and we still feel his energy, and we do feel the loss of him in the physical plane. But let's also remember, none of us, of the three of us, met the dude in person. So what is the difference in a way between what it is that we're experiencing now and what it is that we experienced before, other than we can't hear his voice and he's not joining us on our wisdom talks or on our fireside chats or whatever it is? Like, his energy is still present. But last Saturday or Sunday, sitting in my room and being on the Wisdom app and the beautiful kudos show that Cece did for him, and everybody that came in, and we all basically told different versions of the same story. He was all of our little brother that drove us crazy sometimes, but we couldn't imagine not having him around. There was a story that I started writing at the end of last year called The Man with the Golden Guns. For me, it was just this little one-off story that I posted on Medium. And I happened to read on Wisdom, and I was like, well, this is just a little one-off thing. It's not going to turn into anything. That dude bothered the crap out of me and kept saying, when are you going to write the next chapter? Oh, you got to do this. Oh, you got to do this. You got to do this. I am still writing that book now. I'm like 18 chapters in, and I'm dedicating it to Curtis, because if it wasn't for Curtis, it would have just been something that I one-offed and one-offed it. But I'm saying all this to say, we can carry the legacy of our friends with us by honoring not only their memory, but honoring their energy and choosing to do that every day. And I think that part of the grieving process can become where we are honoring their energy by carrying it with us every single day. And that helps us be able to move forward instead of holding on to the perception of loss.
Well put, brother, as usual. Thank you so
Very
much.
well said.
Yeah. So you touched on some really good points. And before I pass the mic to Kristen, I think it's really important just to understand and sit in the moment of this idea that loss does suck, right? It hurts. It's pain, it's suffering, and we are wired to avoid pain. Run away. But we've all learned the hard way and the easy way that running away from anything actually makes us more like prey, right? You see a rabbit run away from a fox, and it gets the fox's attention, and the fox is chasing after it. It's really the pain isn't something that we can avoid. In fact, suppression and repression of any pain only makes it worse. That's a whole nother talk right there. But the way we deal with it is to go through it, not to go around it, over it, under it, but to go through it. That's the way emotions work, right? Is to let them run their course. And so as I hand it over to you, Kristen, I just have this question I think is on the minds of many people. What is the purpose of grief? Why do we have to suffer, right? The pain of loss. Is there any blessing in that? And you don't have to answer that straight away, Kristen. I'm just posing that for us to think about as you share as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Kristen now.
There's so many different directions I could go with this. There's so many things I'm thinking of. I have suffered through a lot of loss in my life, starting with my brother when I was 11. He was 16. Best friends, family members, close relatives, grandparents, my mom, my dad, my best friend and her daughter, and my oldest brother. So I've gone through a lot of death, a lot of loss in my life, more so than more people that I know, than any people that I know. I mean, it's 25-ish. And the one thing that I've learned repeatedly, and I want everybody to hear this, is that the way you process grief is personal. There's no rule. There's no way it's supposed to be. There's no, I'm supposed to be crying right now. I shouldn't be crying right now. There's no yes, no, maybe. This is about honoring the emotion as it comes up. And anytime that we honor an emotion, it doesn't stick around for very long when we fully feel it. So when we're really sitting in, if we're feeling sad and we allow the tears and we sit in it, we're not going to cry for 6 days. It's just it comes in. It's because it's energy. Emotions are energy. They're energy in motion. So as it comes up, and really what it is emotion, is a physical body response, a chemical response to a thought. So whatever it is that we are thinking about that person, that's why sometimes we're crying and sad and rolling around on the ground. Sometimes we're laughing. I remember people saying things like, we shouldn't laugh at a funeral. Why the F not? If you're telling stories and it's funny, there's no appropriate. It's whatever feels good for you in that time. It's all about honoring the emotion as it comes up. I remember in my 30s, I would tell the story of my brother Henry, and it was a car accident, if anybody's curious, head injury. And every time I told this story, I would cry. Every time, not sob, I would just well up with tears telling my hair clients. And I remember one day taking the time and like looking at the calendar and going, it's been 30 years or something like that, 20 years. I don't know how long it had been, and still made me cry to tell the story. When I investigated that further, what I realized, it made me cry to tell the story because I had a story in my head that said no one should die at 16. It was my story that I was telling about Henry's death that was causing me to cry. When truth is, we're all spiritual beings. And I fully believe that, I guess this is philosophy, but this is my belief, that we pick our expiration date. We come here to learn a certain thing, to grow our souls. And many times when that time is up, I can honestly tell you that I've had many close people in my life that have, I don't want to say predicted their death, but started saying things that then the death happened. It was like they knew, even when it was an unexpected. So part of my grief journey has been to understand that we are spirit in a little earth suit. We're just here doing some things, and we're just going to return back to the unconditional love of source. And it's that same love that people describe in near-death experiences. But I will also say in a recent meditation, I had that experience. I felt like I was moved through the veil. And I'm a member of Dr. Joe Dispenza's once a month Q&A. It's live. And they allowed me to ask my question. And what he said was, congratulations. First thing out of his mouth was, congratulations. I wish everybody had that experience. And the reason why is because when we understand there is this energy of unconditional love that is really the 99% reality. Dr. Joe said this, not me. The unconditional love of God is the 99% reality. This is the 1% reality. So for me, I feel joy when people have passed, not joy, I'm sad for my loss and my own egoic thinking, and now you don't get to be in my life and to fill my life. But for the spirit and the soul that gets to return back to the unconditional love, that's something to celebrate. Now, going back to the feelings, processing the feelings, when my mom died and then my dad died 4 months later, that's close. And these are parents I'm close to, lived within 10-mile proximity of them my entire life. Help raise my kids, the whole thing. But I'm in such, Kristen is a mom first, and I'm in such get it done, tend to the flock. And even if I come upon car accidents and I get into a mode where I'm like tending to, then get in my car later and sob, the energy catches up to me. But I told my family, I said, I'm now, because everybody's good, I said, I can feel that I need to grieve them. Oh, by the way, my stepdad was a year later, and my dog. So it's four beloved souls in my life within 1 year.
Mm.
And so I said, I sat my family down or texted them or something. Thank you, Ron. And I said, I'm going to I can feel it coming. I'm going to allow this now. And it's going to be very strange and at weird random times. But if you just see me driving down the road crying, vacuuming, crying, doing something, getting up out of a movie and going in the other room and crying, let me, because I'm just letting the energy move through me.
Right.
And they all were like, okay.
Yeah.
Right. But I said that because when your mom cries, oh my God, why is mom crying? Why are you crying? Because, you're the rock, you're the leader.
Yep.
But I also wanted them to know that grief is weird. It has its own form. It does weird things. It's all over the place. And there's going to come up at weird times. But I also wanted to give them permission to cry whenever that was serving for them as well. So I will leave it there. I could talk on this forever. So I'm going to go back to you, MoJOE.
All right. Beautiful, beautiful. And thank you both for being very open and personal about this. I think this is really important because death and loss and grief are very personal feelings. And so the more we can connect with someone else's story, the more we can, quote unquote, normalize our feelings. I think one of the big hangups for many people with grief is that they don't want to appear out of control or overwhelmed or whatever their expectations of what, as I think it was Jay Shetty talks about, he says, we don't really even know what anybody else is thinking about us. So our biggest hang up is what we think other people are thinking about us. And that gets very convoluted when you're grieving, right? Because grief, as my wife has described to me, can come in these waves, totally unexpected rogue waves when there was no visible or understandable or perceptible impetus, and boom, you just get knocked down by it. And so my wife's father passed away unexpectedly. We'd only been married a year, and her dad was her rock star, her most important person. I can't describe how beautiful the relationship was between my wife and her father. And so it just sent her off somewhere. I couldn't even get through to her. I didn't know what to do. There was nothing I could do. And the only thing that helped at all was just be there, right? I couldn't say anything that would help because I hadn't gone through it. And she was very articulate about, I know you want to help me, but you can't. This is very personal, as Kristen talked about. And so it was very interesting for me to be hurting for my wife, who was in obvious debilitating emotional pain, but not being able to do anything about it. And I'm a typical husband. I'm a guy. I'm a fixer. I want to make it better. And the more I tried to make it better, the more I made it worse. And so, but thankfully my wife could articulate, I don't need you to fix anything. I just need to go through this. And if I know I'm not going through it alone, it'll make it a little easier, right? So it wasn't my words. It was just my presence. To go back to what we said about Curdy, his presence was his greatest present. And that's true for all of us, especially in times of pain and suffering and grief. But one of the most beautiful descriptions I heard of grief is that it's love with no place to go. Grief is love with no place to go, right? Because you've had it flowing in this dynamic, beautiful relationship with someone and they're not there presently. So you don't, where does the love go? And it's like, it gets all dammed up, right? And people use those words and they often ask God to make it worse by asking God to damn it. And I'm like, don't do that. What if he's listening? Right? So I think it's really important that this whole concept of what's helpful isn't to bottle it up or to deny it or to suppress it, but to find healthy or at least safe ways to let it flow. And sometimes that's alone. Sometimes it's at the beach in the mountains. Sometimes you're yelling into a pillow or into the void, but allowing the emotions to flow through. We have to go through the emotions or they will fester. They'll stick in there somewhere and they'll come out when you least expect it in ways that you wish they wouldn't. I've witnessed it. I've done it. I understand that. So, it's interesting. If you look at a more historical view, most cultures of the world, and I studied cultural anthropology in college, and so I got to get into depth about this, that most cultures of the world throughout history have very formalized processes for people to grieve the loss of a loved one. And each culture has their own way of doing that. It might be a funeral pyre. It might be sending a boat out onto the ocean. but there is a time allotted for people to grieve, to honor the person that's gone, and to feel their own feelings with no shame, with no judgment, but allow those feelings to be expressed. And grief is one of those things that we will all experience. And it doesn't necessarily, even as D. Grant said earlier, it doesn't have to be the loss of a loved one. It could be the loss of a relationship. It can be the loss of an ideal, right? My wife and I, when we got married, we thought for sure that we were going to have biological children. And then after that, we would adopt. Well, fast forward through many years of frustration and medical help and everything, we find out, no, we can't have biological children. And so we had to grieve the loss of that ideal. Nobody died, but our ideal of what we thought was going to be died, right? When the doctor says, I hate to be the one to break you the news, but it looks like you're not going to be, to my wife, you're not going to be able to get pregnant. Well, that was devastating, right? But it was the loss of this ideal. And so there is a grieving period that's required. It's the way we're built. It's in our DNA, a grieving period to both process what we just heard, to find a way to express it in a healthy, safe manner, and then say, okay, what's next? Where do we go from here? And I got to say, most of you who have grieved before will understand this. There is no prescribed time. It's not a day or a week or a month. For some it's years, right? And sometimes it is like those rogue waves where everything's peaceful in the ocean, and then out of nowhere it'll just smack you upside the head for no particular reason. And that's okay. Grief is funky that way. It is highly personal, as we've said. But wrapping my mind and my heart around the idea that the grief is just love that just doesn't have any place to go and needs to be redirected, right? So I can love the memory of Curtis James and the energy of Curtis James and all the things that I have received from those conversations, either that we had on Wisdom or that I was just listening in and laughing and rolling my eyes or whatever I was doing. It's all part of me now, right? It's not gone. And what I also wanted to add in the conversation right here is that I heard this beautiful conversation with a beautiful man named Sadhguru, and he was talking about, just ask yourself this question when you lose someone: what would they want for you, right? We get so caught up in our own pain that we don't ask the question, well, what would my mom or my dad or my grandpa or my best friend, what would Curtis James want us to do now that he's gone? To ball up, to retreat, to get small, to grovel, to cry all the time? No, to let our emotions flow, and then to live, to thrive, to flourish, wherever they are, in whatever form they are. Our loved ones are cheering us on, saying, go for it. I want you to become the best you can be, right? And just that picture in my mind and in my heart brings me to it's like a reframing, a new idea that I'm not grieving for them. They're in a better place. I'm grieving for me. But what that person who I love wants for me is for me to thrive. So I want to embrace what they want for me. I'm honoring their lives. Some people think that, well, if I'm happy or if I'm successful or if I'm moving on, then somehow I'm not honoring the loss, or that I didn't love them very much. That doesn't have to be that at all. That's a false narrative.
Absolutely.
I want to call BS on that, right? That my mother, who's alive, when she passes, she doesn't want me to shut down. She wants me to grow and flourish and thrive as she did my whole life, right? Nothing will change except for her form. So that's my my 2, 5, 16 cents, whatever that's worth there. Hopefully people will take that. So I don't actually have a question to go from here. I just spouting it off. But what's somebody's got something on your mind? Just jump in here.
I have something, but Dee, if you would like to go next, if you've got something. Okay, I'll just pop in there.
All right, Kristen.
A lot of times people don't also know how to handle people who are going through grief. And it's important, I believe, that we understand that this is not in our wheelhouse to fix. There's no fixing whatsoever when it comes to grief or loss or a breakup or any of these things, But I will tell you this, that my son-in-law recently, or future son-in-law, had lost his mom. And I really didn't say anything. I just sat there and held him and I said, I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here. And that's all that he needed. And I continued to say that. We're right here. If he'd cry at something, I just walk up next to him. We're right here. We can't fix this for other people. whatsoever. But knowing that because sometimes it feels like it's going to consume you and you're going to die.
Right.
The ego gets all like, I can't live like this. I remember having a full-blown panic attack, like full-blown falling to the floor, afterwards looking in the window, because I lived with my mom when she passed, and looking in the window, we're sitting outside and seeing the chair she would sit on, and it was empty. And I stood up. I didn't fall to the floor. I actually stood up and I was like, like I just started freaking out. And my husband came behind me. My sister-in-law came in front of me and they wrapped me. It makes me cry. It was so sweet. And they just stood there. And I stood in the middle of them and they just put their arms around me like in a little lock. And I remember just going, my whole essence going, you're okay. You're okay. There's one more thing I want to say real quick, is that grief of death, of a loss of a loved one, isn't always just the loss of a loved one. Sometimes it can leave us feeling some kind of a way. And I did not realize that the death of my two parents and my stepdad so close together that I don't even know how old I was, 2015, maybe 50-ish years old, I internally had processed that now I'm an orphan. And I didn't know this until one day I was driving the car, and you know how the center lanes where people can pull into the lane while you're passing in the through traffic? It's got like that kind of painted median. Someone pulls out really slow and just to get in that center lane out of a parking lot. And I'm going in through traffic, probably 25 miles an hour. I just went through a light, but just them pulling out, I was like, and I had this like intense anxious reaction that was shocking to me, because I was like, how many times has someone done that in my 50 years of driving? 40. And I said, whoa, what is going on here, Kristen? What was that? And I immediately go, what did you just think? And what I thought that had gone through my mind, right through, and had a reaction that I didn't recognize was, you're going to get killed in a car accident and your children are going to be orphans. And then I went, oh my God, I feel like an orphan. And I'm afraid they're going to be orphans. So in that moment, I started paying attention. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've felt anxious, like anxiety inside for over a year. And I didn't even know it until that moment. So this is not just about mourning the loss of the person. That loss might embed itself into your brain to mean something. So when I realized that I felt like an orphan, and now what I literally felt like was free falling, just falling, not no net, just falling, just going to continue to fall and fall and fall like to oblivion with no net. Then I started to work on myself in all the ways that I'm actually safe. And there's still a net, and I'm still captured, and I'm still okay. And the anxiety went away.
Wow. Whew, thank you so much for sharing that. That's real life right there. It's real life and real emotions. You guys both know I'm a student of scriptures. I've been a Bible student since I was a little kid. And one of the most famous of the Psalms that many people know is Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. And one of the interesting verses that I've seen in new light as of late, probably because I'm adulting now, is that, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. And the picture in my mind, whether this was the actual intention or not, is that in a valley, in a canyon, if you cry out, you get an echo effect, right? Hey, 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 you get the echo effect. And so as I just pictured myself walking through the valley of the shadow of death, not even death itself, just the shadow of death. Death casts a shadow. And I hear this voice of fear screaming out in the canyons, and it's echoing back. And I realized at some point that the echo has no substance. It sounds like my voice, and it sounds like I'm afraid, and it sounds like I'm going to die, right? But it's just an echo, and grief creates an echo, right? An echo. When we lose somebody, we lost Curtis, we lost someone in our lives, so we lost an ideal, couldn't have children, all those things. There's an echo, and it comes back from time to time, and it sounds real, and it creates that same fear when I elicited the voice the first time. But it's in maturity and growing and in learning and companions and all these things that we talk about that begin to realize, is this really, am I going to die? Or is it just the echo of my voice coming back, right? Just coming back to haunt me in a sense. And therefore, I love the end of that verse. I won't fear any evil because it's not even real. It's just the echo. It's the sound of what I was afraid of, but it can't hurt me. An echo can't hurt me. It sounds like me, quite honestly, which I think there's a whole bunch of great stuff there. So I want to pass this off to Dee. And Dee, if you don't mind, I'm going to lead this question a little bit because I know your story and I've heard you share it several times, but you lost a significant relationship in your life and ended up writing a book about it, which is profoundly helpful and intuitive and a beautiful spiritual journey. But would you mind not necessarily sharing all the details of that, but what you went through in the loss of that very important relationship, and then how that has played itself out over the years, what you've learned, how you've grown?
Sure. Very much like what Kristen said, I don't think there's necessarily a roadmap for grief, whether we're losing a relationship or whether we've lost a relationship, we've lost a person. Tigger is vocalizing his. You agree with that, buddy?
I love him so much.
Amen, amen, amen.
He's over there going like this.
Yeah, that's exactly, you saw it. That's exactly what he's doing. There's not a playbook for this stuff, but there are, we can call them tools, we can call them methods. I will admit that when I was going through the first parts of grieving the end of the marriage, I wanted to skip all of the painful stuff, and I wanted to get to the healed stuff, because the healed stuff meant that I could feel better and not suffer anymore. And there's something that is worth pointing out, and I think it really ties into what you just shared about that psalm of, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. We have to walk through the valley. We can't walk down the forest line of death or through the outskirts of the town called death. We can't take the side streets and the back way. We have to go right down through the valley where it is dark and treacherous and dangerous and scary as hell, where we think we might lose everything that has been of significance to us. But it's also in these places, and I think this is when we're dealing with the loss of a relationship, the loss of a job, the loss of money, the loss of anything, a close personal person that has been like our rock, our shield, our everything. What I've discovered in the grieving process is it's in these places where we allow ourselves to feel the potential for what God could feel like in a place when we don't know what anything feels like, and we're so afraid of what death and loss feels like. Oftentimes that's where God's wanting to meet us, because we have nothing else to turn to. And that was what my experience was. In the process of me, without being aware of the fact that I was pushing away, suppressing painful emotions, I got hit with an avalanche tsunami of just the depths of the loss that I was feeling. And the way I describe it is, it felt like I was like 20 stories below rock bottom. But it was in that place. I was laying here in the floor, just hardwood floor, kitchen, shaking, crying my eyes out, convulsing, like I was having a seizure, and it was like just it was hell. But it was in that place where I heard all of the voices of my ego telling me all of the things that it had been telling me since almost birth about how, hey, this just shows you're not good enough.
Right.
She just proved to you that you really don't have what it takes. You're not worth it. You'll never be loved. And that's only exacerbating the pain, increasing the loss. But in that moment, there was this still small voice that I think plays into the part of Psalm 23. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and death is screaming at me in the caves, and all I can hear is its voice echoing off of the walls. I will not fear because you are with me. And the you that is with me is not around me somewhere that I'm hoping will find me. God is already inside of me, waiting to be known. Because in that point, I heard the still small voice from inside of me say, you don't know what love really is. And you don't know how to love yourself. And this is the true cause of all of your pain. I saw the two as separate, and I had to chase after love, but the more I chased, the more it ran away. And I think the same thing is true in our grieving process. We can chase after peace. We can chase after some sort of sense of relief or some sort of sense of we're going to make it through this. We can also allow ourselves to grieve, allow ourselves to feel that loss, and allow ourselves to realize that part of why we were gifted this person in our relationship was to show us who we really are and to show us how awesome we are and to show us how loved we are. And will we receive that gift that they gave us every single time we had a chance to interact with them? Because if we're really going to love them and value and honor their life and their death, we'll receive that love and walk with it now. And that will be who we are instead of something that we try to chase after in order to feel better. No, it's already here. Will you receive it now? And I take that from my friend Mark in his passing. I take that from Curdy J. I take that from when my grandfather died 20 years ago. I didn't see it coming. I had just driven 11 hours to go to Mississippi. He was in the hospital. He'd been battling cancer for a year and a half or so. He was in high spirits, big smile on his face, looked at me and he's like, hey, buddy, how you doing? And I was like, Pop, and I didn't say this, but I was thinking, we were told you were on your last legs and we need to get over here as fast as possible because this was it. But you look to be in great spirits. He's going to be fine. So I gave him a big hug, said, I'll see you later, Pop. Went to his house. Next day, 7 o'clock in the morning, Mom calls. He passed in the night. And it took me weeks before that finally hit me. My grandfather wasn't my best friend, but he was one of my biggest heroes. And I realized that for me to really showcase the value that he had left, that he left in my life, and the value of the love that he gave me, is for me to carry that love. Because we're all one. We're all one consciousness. We're all God. We're all love. Love lives inside of us. We're all connected. So the love that lives inside of me lives inside of you, Kristen, lives inside of you, Joe, lives inside of you, Cece, lives inside of you, Ron. Different variations of it, different flavors of it, all the same love. So my purpose, I believe, in life is to be the love that I was sent here to be. And by me being the love that I was sent here to be, then I'm giving honor to all of the beautiful souls that I've had the opportunity to know in my life without attaching on to some sort of thing that has to be a part of my journey in some specific way, or I'm not whole. No, we are whole. We don't have to do anything. But when we choose to realize that we already are whole, we already are loved, we already are loved, then the grief process can become a whole lot easier. And it can be something where in our memories, we're not feeling just the sadness of what isn't here. We're also feeling the love of what is always present.
Oh my gosh. Standing ovation.
Good.
I'm going to stand up.
I can
All of
feel
that.
Definitely feel that.
All of that.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. We're at the hour, and I don't mind going longer if you two both have time, or we can put a pin in this and continue next week. Do you have a preference?
I have just a little bit.
Okay. So we'll go a little bit longer, and if we're not finished with this, we can pick it up again next week. I want you to respond to that, Kristen, but before you do, one of the things that came to mind for me is, as you two have both heard me say, one of the most important switches in my mindset is going from I have to I get to. I get to means I'm grateful, that I'm looking for the blessings. And applying that to grief is not easy, to loss is not easy. But I think I'm challenged, even as I'm talking right now, to look at grief and loss not as something that I have to go through or that I have to endure. It's something I get to. And in fact, it's been said that the deeper you grieve, the more beautiful the love was, right? If
I
you
was
lose,
just writing that.
yeah, if you lose something you didn't care about, it doesn't hurt. You lose something you deeply care about, it hurts deeply. That's just the way we're wired. And so I can actually look at the hardest, most painful losses as also that means that I really got to love something truly, deeply, profoundly, and be grateful for that. There's a very challenging scripture for me that says, in everything, give thanks. It doesn't say for everything, give thanks, by the way, but in every circumstance, give thanks. And I don't think that's toxic positivity.
Nope.
That's realizing that there is something beautiful in death. There is life in death, right? That the destruction of a life can create something beautiful. So I don't have to go through grief. I actually get to. Okay, I'll pass it off to you, Kristen.
I wrote it right here. I'm going to show you guys so you know. Blessing of having the love. Okay. One of the perception shifts, one of the things I've learned in this life is that I get to choose the perception that I want to have at any given moment. I can choose to suffer or I can choose to have peace. And one of the ways that, and this is not toxic positivity, nor is it spiritual bypassing, because as you know, I will cried right here. There was one point I was in a ball on my bedroom floor for an hour and a half, 2:00 in the morning with my husband wrapped around me. I'm not afraid to grieve. That's not the issue. However, I do know that I get to choose my perception, and I can choose peace or I can choose struggle and suffering. And one of the ways that, and this is not me actually choosing peace, I'm not saying that, but one of the perception shifts that actually gave me peace, and I mean heart-centered real peace, not frosting on dog poop, real peace, was going, how freaking lucky am I that I got to experience the love of these people? Holy moly. And when you sit in the experience of that love, it's almost mind-blowing. And to know that the love is energy. It cannot be created or destroyed, or your people. So just because they're not here in the physical form does not mean they're not with you. So my mother, my father, my best friend, my brothers, all these people, I still talk to them like they're here. For a small example, my mother, basically, I called her the best husband I ever had because she helped me parent Remy when I moved in with them. And Remy will do something cute, and I'll just like my mom standing, because we used to look at each other like, you seeing this? We see that, like, so cute. And I do that. I'm like, you seeing this, Mom? You seeing this? That's her. She's still with me. That energy is still here. So that's the one thing I was going to say. The other thing I was going to say, and I'm not inviting anybody to do this who's not ready, who doesn't feel called to this, that is in a different place. This is just what I did. But I've learned through certain things in my own life, and these aren't things that made me push away emotions. These are things that actually helped me to process and see life through a different lens. And one of those was, what did I learn from this? Like you were just saying, Joseph, like everything you just highlighted was what I wrote down. That's the box next to the other one I just wrote. After my brother Henry passed away at 11 years old, unbeknownst to me, what I had learned, what my brain processed was love hard, love now, and never go a day without people knowing that you love them. No regrets. So here I am in high school when it wasn't this big hug culture back in the day. And I would hug my girlfriends, like put my head around their neck. They'd get so mad. I'm 5'2", but here I was, muscling them, kissing their heads, like, I love you so much, that I was actually called a lesbian. People would say that to me. Oh, what are you, a lesbian? I would just look at them like, I can't love people. Remember, this is the 80s.
Right.
And I was like, no, I'm just loving my friends. Why aren't you? Because in my little brain at 11 years old, boom, they're gone. Did you share it? Did you love? I don't want people to not know that I love them. I'd say it in a group chat all the time with you guys. I love you.
Yep.
Right? Cece,
Yep.
Ron, I love you because I do. And there's nothing weird about it. No matter the gender. Love is love is love is love is love. Okay. So that's the other thing. What I learned from Henry's passing was that love fiercely, love now. My parents passing, how much they stayed in my heart, my mom especially, was you're just going to remember. And the people that came out, the outpouring for her, like the guy you were talking about, Dee, if I was in a small town, that would be my mom. Okay. Your friend. That's how my mom was. The homeless guy that she would have breakfast with every Friday, Steve, Steve, the grocery store clerk that came for Thanksgiving just because she was going through there and paying for some stuff and invited her. So rando grocery clerk comes and has Thanksgiving with us. She was loved by a lot. And the reason why so many people reached out to us was because she touched everybody's life. So what did I learn from this? Be Annalise. Be Annalise. Just love big. Don't be afraid. Show it. Be vulnerable. Be honest. What's the worst that can happen if you say, I love you to someone? They don't say it back.
They think you're a lesbian.
Or you're, are you going to lose an arm? Are you going to die? I don't care if people say it back. There's people I meet, I only know them a couple times, and I'll hug them goodbye and say, I love you. And they just are like, and they leave. Like it's weird to them. I don't care. Because that's the feeling I'm feeling in that moment. So I asked myself, what have I learned from each thing? What did I learn from these things? And to me, there is a blessing and a lesson in everything. I'll leave it there.
So as we wrap this one up, I think it's important to remind each of us that when someone else is grieving, it's not our job to fix it or to comfort them necessarily. I mean, I don't know how many people reached out to my wife when her dad passed away and said what they thought would be the right thing to make my wife feel better. And it just made her mad. Yeah. I mean, people that she was close to, that she'd been friends with for years, would say the most ridiculous things like, well, I guess heaven needed another soul, or what can you learn from this? God has a lesson. And just these really stupid, well-intended things, but not thinking through, obviously people who hadn't gone through grief themselves because they were clueless. And as I said earlier, the best thing I did for my wife is say nothing, right?
Yeah.
I just was there.
I agree.
My presence was my greatest present. And so that actually ties beautifully to everything we've said today, because even at Psalm 23, I will fear no evil in the shadow of death. Why? Because you're with me. I'm here. And Kristen and Dee, you've both heard me share my own story of trauma when I was a kid, and I'd reach out to God and I'd say, why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? Why do you allow this? And the only answer I ever got that made any sense to me was, I'm here, right? I see you. I grieve with you, right? And then that reminds me of the beautiful scripture says, laugh with those that laugh, celebrate with those that celebrate, mourn with those who mourn, so that they're not alone. Because aloneness can make us very isolated. And by the way, whoever's listening, you are never alone. That's a lie. So don't believe that lie. This conversation has been absolutely beautiful. I've loved it. I'm not surprised at all. And our time is up. So maybe we will continue along these lines next week. Maybe we'll go a different direction. I have no idea. But I do want to thank everybody who tuned in, especially to Cece and Ron for the comments that you've shared in the chat. For those that were listening on Wisdom or watching on any other platforms, we love you, right? And just remember, I also want to throw in a little side note that saying I love you can be meaningless if you don't show it with your actions, your heart, your energy.
Yeah.
Sometimes loving somebody doesn't even include those words, right? So we can love those that have passed before us. We can feel the love of Curtis and our relatives who have gone ahead. And in fact, we can't not. I mean, we could deny it, we could ignore it or whatever, but all of the people that have gone before us are in us and part of us, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. So why not express that, be grateful for it, right? And to give ourselves that grace to go through grief and allow others to as well. So on behalf of Kristen Brown, D. Grant Smith, beautiful souls who I adore, thank you all for tuning in to this conversation about life and love and loss. And for those of you out there who are going through loss and grief yourself, please know that you are not alone. You're not weird. You're not strange. It's not that nobody else has ever gone through that. It will pass, right? It may take way more time than anybody says is okay. Ignore the people who say you should be over it by now. What do they know? They're not going through what you're going through. And just know that if you feel alone, if you feel like it's never going to pass, take courage from the conversation that we just had now, and know that God is with you. God is for you. You are loved. So thank you, my friends. Until next time, this is Modern Day Alchemists, MoJOE, Kristen Brown.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.